We have Amna. Amna, are you there with us? Great. So Amna TERRASS is a Chief Communications Officer and Analyst at OTE. She brings back 10 years of human rights defense and feminist activism. She previously worked as a strategic consultant and empirical researcher with many groups and partners in Morocco and the region. Before shifting to associative work, she enrolled in a master's in biotechnology and sustainable development and now focuses on understanding the imbrication between climate and environmental rights, assets, access, and food production by and for women. So thank you so much for joining us, Anna. And I would just like to ask you on, of course, you work in research. What is the importance, of course, of gender disaggregated data in economic policy making, and how does that incorporate into what Maria shared earlier in terms of democratization and decolonization agenda? How can we complete a decolonization agenda to influence the reimagining of our financial architecture for a more equitable future? Amna, over to you.
Me now?
Yes, we can hear you
Hello.
now. Yes,
Okay,
go ahead.
so it's just a question of parameters. So thank you, Nicole, Maria, and the interpreters. I also thank the CESR for convening this webinar. My sisters Eva, Jessica, Constanza. I learned so much from your insightful interventions about how women are organizing to resist hostile classes and racist and patriarchal conjuncture by creating their own alternatives or by engaging in advocacy at different levels. I will start my talk by explicitly reminding myself and ourselves that if we are today talking about disaggregated data and how data can be useful, it is because we are all aware that the actual global financial system is patriarchal and classist by nature, and he is more probably generating hostile economic dynamics, and we need disaggregated data to control this hostility and to mitigate it. But we are aware that this should not be the final objective. Okay, let's talk about some data and examples of how are they actually used and how can their use be improved to help inform policymakers to make informed decisions and also movements to push forward the human rights-based economy. Let's start by development policies. In terms of development policies, there are many disaggregated data that are already collected on individuals, including employment, education, but we have many data that are only collected at household levels, like asset access, asset control, ownership, etc. And this is very important because these kind of data inform us about the class of women, and the availability of data is conditioned by the state's ideology, but also history, colonial history, and it determines in each turn how policies are framed and think. I work in a Tunisian watchdog, but I bring with me some knowledge about Morocco also, not only because I'm Moroccan, but also because in theory we include the regional integration as one of the scopes of our agenda. So let me start talking about something that is familial. In Morocco, for example, policies of collective land redistribution are only made at all generation household level. And this was one of the main reasons why a project to title 51,000 hectares of collective land in the Gharb region of Morocco has failed in reporting differentiated impacts of privatization of land, women, and young people, and even generated many conflicts within the communities and between the community and the central government, and made it very difficult for young women and men to maintain social ties to their lands and impacted their labor decisions, etc., etc. So gender disaggregated data at individual level are very needed in order to design transformative policies that contribute to not only to the long-term redistribution of wealth, but also policies that engage in the midterm transformation of the economic situation of people, especially women, children, migrants, and the other minorized and impoverished groups who have no access to wealth, to land, or a limited access to other resources. I talked about development and sustainable development policies. Let me talk also about health. And I will take the example of COVID-19 pandemic. Surveillance 6 disaggregated data were of big interest, for example, to monitor and identify gender responsive and evidence informed solutions to address the key drivers of the pandemic and to examine trends on testing to outcome pathways, but also in order to inform the crisis social protection policies. According to a study's results that are drawn from 18 months global data collection from over 200 countries, the availability of data was very linked to economic status of the country. And when we say economic status of the country, we talk also about the history of colonization and all the factors that maintained some countries in not some countries, but a lot of countries in a situation of low income condition. Gender disaggregated data are also needed to assess the potential impacts of social security new systems. We talk about cash transfers, for example, especially on women in rural areas and underbanked people. We can also talk about education sector and what 6 disaggregated data tell us about how both distance of schools from homes and whether sanitation are available or not in schools are serious factors of female dropouts from schools. And in addition to social sectors related policies, these disaggregated gender data, when available, they are used to design composite indexes that encapsulate policy-relevant feminist knowledge on women experiences and their disadvantaged social, economic, and political position. This knowledge constitutes a conceptual framework that informs the selection of a number of dimensions that can be expressed through some indicators. And of course, the measurement is constrained by data availability, and the data availability is very structural and systemic in this regard. The gender composite indexes are very important and can be used by movements and organizations to strengthen the case to face the impoverishment of women and people of colors due to financial economic policies, especially those that target public services. It offers comparable information for a large number of countries and help monitor progress toward gender equality. But even those gender composite indexes have many limitations, and here my talk will be based on UN Women discussion paper towards improved measures of gender inequality. So according to UN Women, country rankings can be contested because it's disregard the colonial history that limits the capacity of the countries of the global south to fulfill their obligations on gender equality. And it reinforces the notion that each country is functioning on its own to address gender inequality. While there are many transborder factors that have differentiated impacts on women's situation according to their class, religion, and colors, so these indexes do not capture diversity by class or race or intersectionality or the size of gaps between the groups within the same country or the same region. And they provide a limited representation of gender equality by shrinking the conceptual choices of dimensions, including reproductive labor. So according to a critical review, gender equality indices, all 17 existed multidimensional gender equality indices neglects unpaid reproductive labor. And the non-recognition of unpaid labor in general in patriarchal orthodox economy is a poignant issue, notably in Tunisia, for example, where women spend at least 5 hours per day on housework, compared with just 39 minutes for men. And Jessica brilliantly showed how unpaid labor of women is very crucial in maintaining the work of organization, the work organization in the labor markets of the capital system. And I don't know if I have the time. I wanted to highlight some.
Sorry, Amna. You have 1 minute left.
Okay. I just wanted to highlight some deficiencies in some UNDP gender indexes, but in general, it is about the fact that we use outdated indicators and useless indicators to talk about life expectancy, to talk about the life and long life and healthy life. And also the education, we don't take into account what women gain in terms of knowledge capital in schools, and also some methodological problems in using aggregated and disaggregated data in the same indexes. The problem of the irrelevance of some indicators in defining political participation of women, for example, in authoritarian regimes or facade democracies. We cannot talk about the share in national parliaments as a real indicator that reflects the women participation in making economic policies. I just wanted to say also that UN Women proposed 2 new gender indexes, and I think it is very important to consider this. Gender parity index, which is a relative measure of well-being, which encompasses the dimensions of health, education, decent standard of living and decision making, and the women's empowerment index that focuses on women and measures freedom from early motherhood, reproductive choice, freedom from anti-partner violence, as well as women's capability to seek education, pursue science, technology, engineering, etc. So we need to combine our efforts with those of the feminist and women organizations in order to call for gender-sensitive informational policy. We live in a world where the information and the data is more and more generated in order to maintain control, while we have disaggregated data scarcity in our countries, and that would be that would help us to assess the responsibility of the IFIs in the systemic violations of women, and to incorporate the feminist and human rights obligations into some issues like debt management and debt policies, etc., etc. We need to replace these violations in their context of patriarchal, capitalist, and colonial and racial domination, and the way how we use data and how we collect them are very important to inform these processes. Thank you.